Hi, everybody. Andrew Champagne here alongside JD Fox for this week's edition of Champagne and JD. If you've been following us for the last month or so, we've been interviewing track announcers from around the country, and we are both really, really, really excited for this one. We're excited for every show, but this one in particular, I'm particularly excited to make the introduction for. And JD, you know what? He doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway because that is just the kind of guy I am. If you look up the term racing ambassador anywhere, it's this guy. This guy. I always do that. I always get it mixed up. It's a 50-50 shot with directions. But anyway, this guy has done a lot to promote the sport to a large variety of people. You might know him as a track announcer. You might know him as a podcast host. You might know him for his social media presence. You might know him for his social media awards show, which might well be the only entertaining award show in the history of award shows. It is our pleasure and our honor to welcome Jason Beem to the show. Jason, thanks for stopping by, man.
I appreciate you guys having me on, and I was very excited to see some the video footage in the open from my neck of the woods, Hastings Racecourse.
Yeah, JD pulled out all the stops for that open. He went to Hastings. He went to Australia. He basically pulled everything from everywhere. We've got a good production team here.
Hastings. Go ahead, JD.
If you have licensing, licensed video out there that can be used freely, and you're a race course, I basically found your name is Hastings, and mind you, I mean Hastings is one of my favorite tracks anyway. But that was just a happy coincidence, and you're the first person to pick it up. Now we have footage of Flemington on there, and we've had guests that obviously have figured that one out from our Australian friends. But you're the first person that cracked the code that was a bunch of Hastings footage. So
I'm gonna tell people Hastings is way underrated as a live racing experience. It's because what the video footage, and no offense to the lovely folks at Hastings, it looks like 1974, right? And you don't get to see the backdrop of the track from the feed. And what you miss is that there's these gorgeous mountains, a river, downtown Vancouver in the distance. It's really a really neat spot to go for a weekend of racing. And it's one I've never hear people talk about, oh, I'm going to Hastings, but people should. It's great.
My dad went once, and unfortunately, in typical Champagne fashion, he said the wrong thing to the wrong person. He went, and he had no idea what to expect. This was maybe 15, 20 years ago. He was in Vancouver, in that neck of the woods, decided to go to Hastings, goes in, looks around. He sees one teller. He goes up and goes, "Where's the rest of the racetrack?" But he loved it there. He loved the place. Awesome. It's just, of all the first impressions one could make, you know, it's, that probably tells you a lot about me too. Anyway, there are a lot of different directions that this interview could go in. We're really excited, as we've mentioned, to have Jason with us, but in going to the same path that we've started every interview with so far in this series with track announcers, tell us a little bit about how you got your start. What made you want to go up into a booth with a pair of binoculars and a microphone and convey what was going on to a audience that had a vested interest in the proceedings?
When I was a little kid, Longacres was my home track here in the Seattle metropolitan area, a town called Renton, and I grew up right up the hill, like 5 minutes from the track. And we had this great announcer there who a lot of people know, Harry Henson from Hollywood. Well, his son Gary was the longtime announcer at Longacres. He was there from, I think, 1973 to 92 when it closed. And so my dad would always take me to the races. My mom would give me $20 and I could bet $2 each race. And then afterwards I would go home. Our neighborhood was a perfect oval around. Like if you go look at the Google map, it's literally a perfect oval. So I would go home after the races and I'd ride my bike around in a circle or an oval and replay the races that day. And I would do it in Gary Henson's voice, and I'd have a stick, and I'd whip my bike, and I'd get my baseball pants on so I looked like a jockey, and would just do, "Here comes Captain Kondo on the outside," and do the calls. And so I always loved it and, had that kind of tone in my head. And then I got a job at Emerald Downs in 2004 working in the media office. It was kind of my first after college job. I mean, I worked for my mom's company for a couple of years, but I got a job as the turf rider there, and I got to be friends with Robert Geller, who was the longtime announcer there and now is at Woodbine. And I would just, when we would have races going on, but I was kind of done with my writing work, I would sneak over. The media office was right next door to the suites, and so I would sneak over there and take a set of binoculars, and I would just practice calling the race into a tape recorder. And right before that meet was over, I took a tape to Robert. And if you know Robert, he's the sweetest guy in the world. He would never say a bad word about anybody, but I was still nervous, like, because he's a pro and I was nobody. And he was just super encouraging. And he's like, no, he goes, you can do this, really, you need to stick to it. Da, 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 da. So that winter, I started going down to Portland Meadows and practicing on the roof there. And the guy who was the announcer there, Mike O'Brien, who I actually talked to like a week ago for the first time in 15 years, he was real encouraging as well, because he saw me out there every day practicing. Portland runs in the winter and fall, and so it was always raining, and I'm getting dumped on, but I got my tape recorder, my binoculars, and I'm practicing. And they were real encouraging. Finally, they told me I couldn't go on the roof anymore because the GM got worried I was going to fall. But so that I had to move to the empty grandstand. But everybody there was like super supportive, and they let me call a race. One random day, Mike literally said, like before the sixth race, he goes, "Okay, you're doing the next race." And they totally dropped it on me. I had 15 minutes of notice. It was a 7-horse field sprinting, so it was a little bit of a layup, which was good. And in fact, I noticed it was January 8th of 06, so it's 15 years in a couple weeks, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I remember the first time they came onto the track, I heard my voice, because you had to open the window to call there, and I could hear the echo of the speakers, and I'm like, oh crap, this just got really real. And so, they go in the gate at the 6 furlongs, and somebody told me once that your first race should always be a mile race, so that way they're starting in front of you, so you can watch with the naked eye and not the binoculars at the start, because my hands were like this. And so I pinned my arm against the windowsill as much as I could to stop the shaking, and it went okay. I didn't really screw anything up, but you could hear I was really nervous. Like, I forgot to breathe. That's one of the important parts. And the horse was named a colt named Sue, which I thought was a great name. And so that horse won. And then like a week or two later, they let me call 2 more races. And then about another week after that, it would have been early February of 06, Mike was sick, so I got to fill in for a whole day. I completely butchered the 6th race. Like, I mean, I was lost. And then there was a gap of like a length between the 4th and 5th horse. And I said, and it's a gap of 4 lengths. And my inner monologue went, 4 lengths, but I said it out loud. And so I mocked myself in the middle of the call for how bad the call was. So I called the TV guy after the day of races, and I said, can you make me a tape of races 1 through 5? And so he did, and that became my demo tape. And I sent it out to Grants Pass Downs, Great Lakes Downs, and River Downs. Those were the 3 places. Vic Stafford told me that those were the places he heard needed people. And River Downs called, and the guy talked to the guy for half an hour, and then he called a week later and offered me the job, and I was off and running. And halfway through my first summer at River, Mike O'Brien at Portland quit because Portland moved their schedule to weekdays, and he had a regular 9 to 5, and so I had 2 jobs within like a month and a half of starting.
Wow.
Yeah.
It got really real really quickly, and obviously you've been around the country, and you've got kind of an interesting mix of racetracks that you're calling at now. You go from having multiple turf courses one place to having soccer fields at the other. So kind of give people an idea of kind of your landscape of calling and how you adapt from a tight track like Grants Pass Downs to a very wide open track like Colonial.
Yeah, they're very different. In 2019 and 2020, I think between them, I've done Monmouth, Colonial, Gulfstream Park West, Calder, and Grants Pass, and it's incredible how different all of them are, just from various heights of the booths to the size of the tracks. I mean, Calder, obviously, you guys probably know it wasn't even a booth; it was a
rest in peace, Calder.
Yeah, it was a shipping container, and so you're only like 10 feet up, and so I told somebody once, I said, if Pete ever misses a call there, you guys be nice to him, because it's really, really hard there. But yeah, I mean, Grants Pass it's a half-mile track, and I almost don't need to use my binoculars, but except for the backstretch and the far turn, I choose to for most of the course just because I do want to be able to kind of get in there. But it's so small that you almost get in too close that you miss anything that happens on the wider action. And Colonial is the exact opposite. It's the second biggest track in the country behind Belmont, and when they're on the dirt track there, out at the half-mile pole, which is where the 3/8 pole is on most tracks, I mean, it just looks like little bugs running around, and so it's really challenging. And then when it gets nighttime there, it's the only place I ever called at night, and the light glare is a challenge off of the window in the booth. But it's obviously very. I mean, Grants Pass is kind of it's like an old football press box kind of thing. And Colonial, I got a very nice room and, great headset and stuff like that. But Grants Pass is going to be a real up and comer. I'm excited of what we're doing there. And I mean, they were handling, 80 to 100,000 last year. And this year we were doing 300-400 most nights. And then the last night we did 850, which is, to think of a track that was a fair meet for 40 years that nobody had heard of until the last year or two. I think it's really growing, and it's cool to kind of be a part of that. And I know so many of the people from my time in Portland. So, but I love the little circuit I kind of have right now because Colonial fits in schedule wise, like completely perfect between the Grants Pass spring and fall meet. I love working for Jill at Colonial. She's super. And and Virginia's just kind of a neat place to go other than the heat, because the heat sucks.
Yeah, that's most of the East Coast during the summer months. Yeah. Take it from an upstate New York guy. I hear you there. Grants Pass, about a 6-hour drive away from me in Northern California. It's on my list of places to go to once this whole breaking the world thing stops. So hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. But you touched on Colonial. COVID has hit all of us in some way, shape, or form. And this year, COVID wound up striking the Colonial Downs meet a little bit short. Take us through those couple of days and some of the challenges that you were faced with and how things looked from your vantage point and your perspective.
So one of the great things about being a race caller is I can kind of not interact with anybody. And so during COVID at both places, I felt very safe. I mean, literally Colonial, to get in, you had to do the temperature, the screening and everything. And then I would take the back stairs up to the booth. And my only interactions through the day are by phone. The stewards would call, the clerk of scales. Once in a while, somebody might come to the door, but so I felt super safe. And I was staying, my lodging, I was staying by myself and all that. I guess what happened was that somebody in the jocks room got it, and and it spread around there. And so I'd heard 7 or 8, folks from the room. I don't know that it was specifically jockeys. Trevor McCarthy was sick one day. And everybody, anytime any jocks are off mounts this year, everybody's first reaction is, well, it must be COVID. And that was, I think, what a lot of people thought. And then the next day, Katie Davis, his now wife, I think they actually got married like yesterday or 2 days ago. She was off the next day. And so then it was like, oh, crap. I had gone to Charlestown for a Friday night of racing. And I was talking to handsome Paul Espinoza, who came down to the apron, and we were having a 6 or 8 foot conversation. And as I was talking to Paul, I got a text that said, there's a bad outbreak in the jocks room. The season's going to be canceled. And so that dampened my, my Charlestown visit a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it's just, it was kind of it felt a little bit like a doomed meet from the start because we had some weather issues. The first day, opening day, got pushed back because it was 100 degrees, and then we had thunderstorms, and it was just like we just couldn't get anything rolling. And then the season ended, and so we missed out on 2 or 3 weeks or something. But in the grand scheme of what a lot of people have gone through, at least for me personally, it wasn't the end of the world.
And Colonial, one of my favorite tracks to bet. I'm happy it's back around, and hopefully we can get a nice 2021 season from there. Largest pick 4 score I've ever had, Colonial Downs 2019 meet. And to kind of open up our stories from the booth, and I may be misremembering this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, okay, Jason, but you mentioned the importance of binoculars at Colonial Downs. I might remember, did you drop them in 2019?
Oh, buddy, the last day of the Calder Gulfstream Park meet, it was mandatory payout day, so I was already nervous, and I was telling my lady friend, I said, this is going to be probably the most people watching me ever, other than maybe the maximum security race. But it's a mandatory payout that I was like, there's going to be $7 or $8 million bet. Like, it's a big day, right? And it's the last day, of course. And so before the pick 6 sequence starts, it poured rain during and after the first race. And so it was one of those things where they move the races off the grass, an hour before it starts. And so everybody's trying to figure, and there's no phones there at Calder. So everybody's trying to, so the stewards, and I used to set my binoculars on the windowsill, but they had a tripod on them. So it weighed it down. So like they weren't going to just fall off. And the stewards were kind of running back and forth. Okay, 6th race, 5 and 7 are scratched, 11s are, out, whatever. And so they were coming up and down like every 5 minutes there for a period of time. And at one point I was up because Pete had a little box made so we can stand up a little higher. Because if you didn't do that, it would hurt your back because you had to lean out the window. But the steward came running in and I turned around and I knocked the thing and they went tipping. And trainer Jenna Antonucci, shout out Jenna, was standing right below me. And because she always watches her horses from right next to the trailer there. And because she heard me scream, "Oh," expletive. And she ran over and she goes, "They're not broken." And I was like, "Oh God, thank God." So she brings them up and I look through and they're blurry. You can't see anything. So I'm like, okay, let me try to adjust them. And it won't adjust. And so they're just shot. And I'm, and they're expensive. I've had it for like 12 years and I love them. And I called every race of my career with them other than the first like 6 months. But when I was driving home, somebody was like, "Well, can't you just get them fixed?" I go, "I don't know if they fix binoculars." So I called Swarovski, and they turns out they do fix them. They literally, I'm convinced they sent me a new pair. Like everything on it is new except for the serial number, and they charged me $75. So Swarovski has my lifetime business for the job they did. Yeah, I was way more bummed about the sentimentality of it, like just because those things had been with me for every point of every race I've called, and so. That was a bummer, but turned out to be just fine.
Yeah. The first time I ever heard you call a race was when I was working for HRTV. And HRTV, of course, was owned by the Stronach Group, who also owned Portland Meadows. So they would do things for Portland Meadows bigger days. And I think it was an Oregon bred showcase day.
Oregon Championship Day.
Yep. And I don't ask me who this horse was or why I remember this particular call among your hundreds of really good race calls. You call the horse as moving like a tremendous Oregon bred.
I remember that one.
How did that come about?
The horse's name, I believe, I think I actually used that call twice. There was a horse named Sam Terriot who was an Oregon bred. And so I'm almost positive that's why I used it. But I did use that twice, and I don't remember Sam Terriot actually being very good, so it very likely was the other time that I used it. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought you got to entertain yourself sometimes at Portland on a cold winter day with 20 people outside. But no, Oregon Championship Day used to be fun. It was often the one weekend day we would run because we wanted to get a big crowd, and we would get a few thousand people on track. And Portland is it bums me out because it was. I mean, I left before they closed, but it was. It had potential, and for like all my first few years there, I used to always hear, Portland makes money, like it's all good. And then as online betting got more and more, I think Portland, because we used to have a really good OTB crowd, and so as that weekend, I think that cost a lot of strength. And they kind of ran into the problem a lot of tracks have and will run into is the land is worth so much nowadays because all these tracks, like you look at Santa Anita and other tracks, they were all built like where the city wasn't. But then the cities have all grown into them now. And so that land can you imagine what the land at Golden Gate Fields and Santa Anita is worth? It's got to be worth billions. I mean, just crazy amounts of money. And so Portland kind of ran into that as well. I mean, it's in an industrial area, but it's still only 5 miles from downtown Portland. It's in the city proper. And when it was built in 1946, it was probably a hayfield. And now it's, Mars Meadows Chinese and Elmer's restaurant and all that stuff surrounding it. And so but yeah, Portland it served a big purpose for Northwest Horsemen, and that's what's so cool about Grants Pass, kind of picking up the baton from them is that the horsemen have in Oregon in particular have a place to run, but also, it generally this year it didn't because Emerald went a little longer, but normally it's going to add a couple months to that Northwest season, both on the front and back end. So I'm really glad that they're doing that.
And I want to shy away a little bit. This is stories from the booth, but as a Northwest guy and a guy that went to school up there as well. Can you explain to everybody how big a Greyhound park in Post Falls, Idaho was to you becoming more of a horse fan as you were going through college?
Yeah, man, I drove by there when I was coming back from Colonial this year and stopped in, and it looked the exact same as it did 20 years ago. I went to law school at Gonzaga. This would have been 03, fall of 03 into 04. And I remember when I got over there, there was a place where you could bet just Emerald at a casino in Spokane, but Post Falls Greyhound was right on the state border. Like it was, Spokane's like 15 miles from the Idaho-Washington state border, and Post Falls Greyhound Park is literally a block past the Idaho border. And it hadn't hosted Greyhound racing for years, but they had a full OTB. And so after law school class, I would drive out there almost every day. And, it was the end of the Arlington meet, in September there. And so I'd be playing that. And there's actually a great story about it. If you just look up Post Falls Greyhound, it was apparently a very expensive thing, and they lost like $20 million. They only ran for a couple years, but it stayed open for 35 years now as a simulcast place. For a while, it was a concert venue, and I think now they host a lot of like parking lot stuff because it's a huge facility when you include the parking lot. So it's just crazy. And you walk in there and there's 10 guys in there firing away. There's no air conditioning, or at least there wasn't. So Eastern Washington, it gets hot, and so it'd be 95 degrees, and they'd have these huge like swamp fans just blowing on everybody while they're watching old box TVs. But yeah, Post Falls Greyhound, man, a lot of, I don't want to say good memories there. They weren't good memories, but they're memories.
I feel like there's at least one of those facilities in every state. I remember stopping at one in lovely Bridgeport, Connecticut at one point. It was literally me and 6 or 8 guys who didn't speak a word of English betting Delta Downs on TVs that I think were smaller than the monitor I'm looking at right now for this show. Oh, yeah. That's the spirit of racing in a nutshell. It's, it's something that unites everybody, no matter where you are, no matter where you go to watch it. I need to talk about Calder Gulfstream Park West for a minute. First of all, the story of how you wound up getting the fill-in gig for Pete is one of the most moving stories I think I have ever heard, simply because of the rationale behind why Pete called you. It's out there. I'm sure people have read it. I need to hear you tell it.
Well, plus you're close to Pete, and you know what a great guy Pete is.
He's an unbelievable human being, and I don't care if he doesn't like me saying that.
No, he's the best. I'll embarrass Pete too. I had stopped announcing in the spring of 15. I had gotten the job at Louisiana Downs. I've written, so I won't talk too much about it, about my mental health struggles that I'd had, and a lot of it with anxiety and depression issues, but mostly anxiety. My diagnosis was panic disorder. And I had been doing pretty well in Portland. And so when the Louisiana Downs job came up, to me, that was the, hey, that's my next step, right? That was, the next step up the ladder. And I was more than thrilled to just follow Travis wherever he went because I knew that would be a good path, which is funny because then I eventually went to Monmouth. But I just struggled really bad at Louisiana Downs. And so I went home and I moved home and I got out of racing for a little bit. I mean, as long as they would let me. And, was driving Uber, and I always had this little side job when I was at Portland of doing a restaurant or a grocery store and restaurant audits, health and safety audits. And so I was doing that, and and during those years, and then I got the Bet America podcast gig, but the podcast gig in a way was kind of enabling of my anxiety issues because I'd got to where I wasn't leaving the house very often because I would have panic attacks. And so I'd go grocery shopping at, 11 o'clock at night when there's nobody there. And I'd ride the scooter around because I didn't want to, I would stand in lines and my knees would give out because I would get so nervous. And so I had applied for, probably 10 announcing jobs between 15 and 18. And I never got a call on any of them. And in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't, because it would have just fallen apart like Louisiana Downs did. I wasn't healthy. And, the summer of 18 and into 2018, I had really started to push myself in my what they call exposure therapy, where you expose yourself to the anxiety and the places that you're nervous about going. And I started going into the shopping mall for 5 minutes, and then I'd go in for 10 minutes, and then I used to, for like 6 months, I walked in the shopping mall parking lot just around my car because I didn't want to ever be too far from my car. That was like my safe place. But I started pushing myself and working with a therapist, and going more places and doing more stuff. And so by the summer of 2018, I was legit, like, I felt like I was living again. I was going to ball games, and I played golf for the first time in a lot of years, and was just really feeling better and doing better. And I was doing my podcast one afternoon. I was down at my lady friend's. She lives in Southern Oregon, and I got a message on Twitter, and it was Pete, and I posted the message in the story. It said, "How do you feel about coming and calling races from a trailer? I'm dead serious," or something to that effect. And so I called Pete after that. And what was funny was, Andrew, I didn't put this in the story, but you'll appreciate this. I had texted Pete 4 or 5 times over the previous 6 or 8 months, just, "Hey, how you doing?" Or he might have said something in a call that I thought was good, and he never returned it. Like, he never returned the message. And so I sent him a text after I got his message, or I told him, I said, "I'll call you when I get done with my show. We'll talk about this." So I called him, no answer. Text him, no answer. And I'm like, he just told me to call him. He had somehow, he claims unintentionally, and I believe him, my number had gotten blocked or muted or whatever. And so I sent Pete a screenshot of all the text messages that he hadn't gotten. And he's like, "I feel like the biggest jerk alive." And I mean, I know he would, I'd like to give him crap about it, but anyway, so we talked, and I told him, I said, "Give me a couple days to think about it." And I decided to do it. And so I drove down there. I hadn't left the Northwest other than to go to Vegas for the NHC one year since Louisiana. And so I was nervous about that. I stopped by Louisiana Downs on my way over there. I didn't tell anybody I was going other than Pete and like Frank and Travis and my mom. So I made my peace with LAD on the way down, and I got there, and Pete, when I asked him, I said, "How come you asked me to do this?" And he goes, "I really thought long and hard about who would appreciate it." He goes, and I thought you would. And I was like, "You're right, I would." And so I always thought that was just so sweet. And he and I have kind of a funny history. I viewed it a little bit, I don't want to say a payback, but when I had crashed and burned from my mental health at River Downs, I left there in the same shape I did Louisiana Downs. And that was the other reason I was nervous about getting back into announcing, because, I had kind of had these mental health struggles for a lot of years and had really blown up 2 jobs because of it. I mean, it was always voluntary. None of my bosses were upset at me. They knew I was sick. But when I had left River Downs in 2008, I called Luke Kreitboss from the road in Iowa. And I said, "Hey, I just quit River Downs." I said, I'm going to go home. I said, "I'm not doing very well." And I said, "If you know anybody that would be interested, let them know." And I'm sure Pete maybe gave his variation of this story, but Luke called Pete. Pete told him no, because Pete had just started a job, I think at Prairie, as like the assistant racing secretary. And Luke called him back a second time. He's like, "Don't you want to be an announcer? Then why the hell are you not taking this announcing job? That's a really good job for your first job." And I guess I think so. I used to always joke that I gave Pete Aiello his start by having panic attacks and wanting to, hurt myself, to be frank. So anyways, I always thought maybe it was like in the back of his mind, Pete was like doing a little payback, but I don't think he was. I think he knew I would appreciate it. And I went down there, and it went really, really well. It was fun. I had no intention of it like leading back to announcing again. I kind of just wanted to end my announcing career on my own terms. And I thought it would be fun. I'd never been to Florida before. And in the article I wrote about the first day back there, calling the races, it went fine. I was nervous, but it went fine. And I got out of the booth there, and I called my mom, and I was so excited to tell her, like, it went good. Like, I didn't, and she had always been the recipient of the calls where, "Hey, I'm coming home. I'm not doing well." And so when she answered the phone, and she was like, I could hear that she was trepidatious, like, "Did it go okay?" And I was like, I didn't even get any words out. I just started bawling, crying. And I sat there in the parking lot and just cried for like 20 minutes. I mean, like that cleansing crying where you're just howling it out. And she just kept saying, "Just get it out. Just get it out." And I remember when it was done, I just told her, I said, "I'm so happy. Like, I'm so happy that I got my life back, at least this much, And so when Pete asked me to do it again the next year, I said, absolutely. And I wanted to do it this year, but with COVID, you kind of just couldn't make it happen. And so, but Calder is very, and I told Pete, I said, "Look, I'm not going to ask for more dough or anything." I said, "Same deal, everything. Let's just do it." But with COVID, you just can't be traveling all over hell and back. And so, Calder it's very, very special to me. I hold that place in my heart very. I still call it Gulfstream Park West, because I only knew Gulfstream Park West. Like, Calder, I feel like, was a separate thing with the grandstand, and other races. So,
and people.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of one of the nice things about it, is like there was no pressure in the sense of people there. But what was crazy is, the other thing was there was no dress code, because like you're there, there's nobody there, and you're in a trailer. And I remember the manager guy told me, he's like, yeah, if you want to wear shorts and flip flops, go ahead. And I was like, okay. And so you'd be dressed like super casual. I mean, like when I went up there the first day, Pete, he has black shirt and shorts on and flip flops. I'm like, all right, this is it. But then you turn around afterwards and there's like 500,000 in the pool for the race. And so it was this weird dichotomy of like very casual, but also kind of big time racing.
And the other thing I was always deathly afraid of with the shipping containers and where the cameramen were standing and all of those things behind the scenes, that unless you had been there or know somebody you didn't really know all about, I was worried about the lightning rod mentality there. So I'm glad that everybody ended up being safe while that was the configuration of the track, for sure.
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, like I said, it was so much fun. Like, and Pete will tell you too, like it really challenges you as an announcer. And so like you have to be on your game, and I definitely would walk out of there proud, just of the sense that like, man, those were 10, 12 horse fields and all bunched up, turning for home with a bad angle, and we got through them. So I mean, it was neat.
That's freaking awesome. The story about Pete contacting you and talking about how, because I thought you might appreciate that, just it brings tears to my eyes because it's so genuine, and it speaks to how good a guy Pete was. One question before we move on to the next segment, and this is because this name has come up a lot in a lot of our interviews with a lot of track announcers. You mentioned Luke.
Yeah.
Luke, a guy obviously taken from us way too soon, a guy that everybody we have talked to has had rave reviews about, and that's rare, especially in racing. It's rare to have someone who is so universally liked and even beloved. Talk to us a little bit about Luke and what he meant to you.
Yeah, he the thing is you would have got the same mentions about him if he was, if he was still alive too. Like he was just the best. And, because he was someone of prominence in our particular industry, everybody was always very, admiring of him. But like, then you'd go hang out with him and all he'd want to do is talk about you or other people or other stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, just the first time I met him, this story throws somebody under the bus. So I always feel a little bit bad about it, but that's all right. I went down when I was first going to River Downs. I went to Turf Paradise because I went through the South because it was still early spring. And so I didn't want to go through the mountains. So I went to LA, went to Santa Anita, and then went Turf Paradise, Sunland Park, Lone Star, River Downs, and actually Oaklawn too. It was an amazing first trip. But I went in and introduced myself to Luke. I said, I'm the backup. I was the backup at Portland, and I just got the job at River Downs. And he goes, "Oh, great." Oh, I feel bad telling the story already. So he let me hang out the whole day with him, and he was so cool. And it's a tiny booth at Turf Paradise there. I mean, and so he let me hang out right outside, and he was just so awesome and nice. And, we exchanged numbers. He's like, "Yeah, keep it up, keep doing a good job. And I'll see you down the road at some point." And so I get to River Downs, and on Preakness Day that year, he calls me and he goes, "Yeah, it's Luke Kreidboss." I go, "Oh, hi, Luke, how are you?" He goes, "I got to apologize." He goes, because there was another backup at Portland who was a very loud kind of caller and a sweetheart of a guy. That's why I hate telling the story, but it is kind of funny. And Luke goes, "I honestly thought you were the other guy that was terrible. You're doing good." Oh, I feel so bad. I hope he doesn't watch this. But yeah, and then Luke, subsequent to that, when we would go back Portland, Turf Paradise in Portland on Mondays and Tuesdays, that was kind of it for that, because that was before everybody started moving to Mondays and Tuesdays. He would call me right after the changes and go, "Yeah, I want to order that roast beef lunch special you were just talking about there." And he would just do little prank calls. One time he called as Frank Stronach, which was great because Luke's voice was so Luke, he could never do an impression of anybody. Like he would do an impression of Robert Geller, Larry Colmish, "They're into the stretch." And it's like, that sounds like you saying they're into the stretch. But he called us Frank Stronach. He goes, "Yes, this is Frank Stronach. You're doing a great job for us. We're so," and he would do that stuff like every week or two. But my favorite quick Luke story was at Churchill, River Downs. We were always off Wednesday. So me and my buddy Vince Seister, who was friends with Luke, we would drive to Churchill to watch the races. And then afterwards, we'd always go out with Luke after the races. So one day we just decided to stay at one of the bars at Churchill, and Luke was never on TV. On the Churchill signal, at least rarely. And so a lot of people didn't know what he looked like. So we're sitting at the bar, and, and Luke enjoyed his time at the bar. And so he's a couple of pops in, and he was telling me about how there was a harness track in Quebec where the guy would call the race half in French and half in English. So, onto the fire turd and and he's doing the impression. And some guy walks up behind him and goes, "Man, you sound just like Luke Boss." And Luke goes, "I get it all the time." And the guy was dead serious. And then he just walked on like nothing was going on. I always thought that was great.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. On a serious note, we have had a lot of people during the series talking to about Luke, and I know Craig Braddock, who's now the announcer at Turf Paradise, is putting together a memorial thing in the press box. So anybody that watches this, reach out to me if you've got any cool Luke stuff that you'd like to be part of that, because one of the things that as Craig has been cleaning up the press box there, he's found some of Luke's stuff, so kind of finding a nice fitting tribute for that. That's
yeah, I know Churchill has his binoculars and crayons in a glass kind of box, which I thought was because he used to have these massive binoculars. Like most guys have good quality one stuff, his were just huge. They were like a foot long or something. They were too big. They were crazy.
Yeah, and crowns is definitely something he's known for. So we have in that already that Craig has found. He's found used crowns that Luke had, and then an unopened box that had Luke's name on it.
That's
so
awesome.
Cool stuff there. So, next we wanted to talk a little bit about content creation in 2020, and we'll throw the horse racing part of that at the end, but I kind of want to talk to you about kind of your travel series and getting a drone and some of the cool stuff that you were able to do as you crisscross the country, because we've talked about it. You literally have a job right now where there's a stretch where you've got to make this drive, and you've taken the time to do something cool and kind of document it for everybody.
Yeah, the video editing stuff I just kind of learned for my own enjoyment. I like to make the little travel videos honestly, just to have someday to go look at it. Like once a year, I'll go back and watch some of them, and it's just fun to be like, oh, I remember going through Kansas, or it's basically just a video diary. But I spent a lot of time early in February, March, like just watching stuff on YouTube, learning about video production and camera. And I mean, I am a very rank amateur still, but I do feel like just learning about it has helped the production a little bit. And I mean, and really just, you don't need like crazy amount of stuff. Getting the drone is fun just because it's fun to fly, and it adds some kind of neat exterior shots. I did one day when I was going through Kansas, it was super windy, and I bought the Mavic Mini, which is the tiniest one you can get. And it's the only one like small enough to where you don't have to register it with the FAA, because it's like 249 grams or something. But that also means that if it's windy out, it ain't going to work too good. And it was a really windy Kansas day, and I flew it out over this field. It was like it was really struggling. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just, I really enjoy that process of making a video and kind of thinking out a storyline of how the trip's going to go. I mean, even though obviously you don't know what's going to happen. And on a lot of those particular trips, I don't even, I hadn't covered a lot of that ground. So it was all new stuff. And I don't know, it's honestly, when you're driving across country, you got to keep your mind occupied. So it kind of gives me something to think about of like, oh, I want to get a shot of this or a shot of that. And, I have little suction cup things. And so I can put my phone, suction it onto the thing, and just, call for Siri to shoot a video. So you don't have to sit and, be distracted while you're driving. I mean, technology's pretty crazy at this point, but yeah, it's, I love doing that kind of stuff. It's just fun to have a little project to do for a day.
I can attest to that, having driven cross country myself. You go from upstate New York to the LA area, that second day of the trip, going from Illinois to Colorado, you only cross 3 or 4 states, but it's all of Iowa. It's all of Nebraska.
Be careful, Champaign.
It all looks the same.
Kansas was my tough one this year. That was, it's so big. Like they're so big. And Kansas, there's no
carry on your wayward son, and it doesn't let you because it's all the same for 6 hours.
I'm a Kansas bred who went to school in Iowa, so I'm
we're
just
torturing you right
struggling
now.
a little right now.
I will say I'll gladly bash this state as my least favorite to drive through, because it's a beautiful state. I don't want to say that, but to drive through West Virginia is the worst because there's no straight roads. It's all up hills, down hills. It's all mountains. It's the mountaineers, right? And so you can never like just kind of kick back and drive. Like you have to be like really locked in. And there's a million semi trucks too. And then like you drive through these like bog towns, and like there's just never a nice straightaway where you can. Whereas Kansas, it's the opposite of that. It's just straight as a string for 500 miles. But
I actually get to tell this story. This is great because I've driven through West Virginia as well. A job I almost got out of college was as a news and sports radio person in Charleston, West Virginia. So I drove down. It was a 10-hour drive from where I was in the Hudson Valley. You go through the truck routes in Pennsylvania. There's no quick way through the truck routes in Pennsylvania. None. You go through there, Western Maryland, you duck down. So I get down there, stay in a little Best Western, do the interview the next day, start driving back. I had stopped for the night in a little motel near the West Virginia-Maryland border. And for some reason, I can't place this, but I got into this mentality of right in Pennsylvania, I say, okay, I don't care where I stop, but I need to get out of this car simply because I've been driving almost nonstop for a better part of 3 days. I see a sign for Penn National. I'd never been to Penn National.
Yeah, Granville, PA.
Yeah. So I get off. I forget what the name of the freeway was. It might have been 81. 81 to 84. And I get off there. They weren't running, but the casino was open. So I literally get out of there. I play one shoe of $15 blackjack. I won enough to grab a decent lunch at a little sandwich place right there. And then I was back on the road. It's those little diversions from road trips that make everything worthwhile. That was 2010. I wish I had had the equipment I have now back then because I absolutely would have documented it and it would have been fun. I also wish Penn National was running. That way I could cross it off the tracks I've been to list in good faith. Unfortunately, I can't do that. So having said that, there's a lot of good stuff that Jason's produced out there on YouTube outside of where I'm going next.
I was going to sneak in one more Luke story, though.
What was that?
One more Luke story,
because that same first trip where I met him, I hit a super in the last race for $2,000. Because back when the dollar super, you could make some money on the superfecta. And I had left the booth like for the last two races. I wanted to watch two races. And I was like screaming up and down, and Luke was like waving, but he didn't know what had happened. So that when he did call that next time, he's like, "Why were you screaming?" That one day. I go, "Dude, I popped the super. I paid for my whole trip." So it was great.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, those dollar supers. I mean, you got to be right, but when you're right, you get paid, and you get paid handsomely. That's for darn sure. Now the Beemies. This is going to be a tricky, fun little topic, and I'm sure it's not something that Jason was looking forward to discussing, because when Gimmick Andrew comes out to play, Gimmick Andrew calls himself the best to have never won a Beemie. But I'm not going to go there.
Good.
You pointed out, not going to go there. What was going through your head when you decided to do this? Because this is something that over the past couple of years is something that has brought a lot of people together. And in some cases, people from far outside the horse racing world have not just been part of the Beemie Awards, they've become part of the Beemie family. See also Julian Muscat.
Yeah, Julian, that poor kid. Nobody was more happy that they were over. And he actually tweeted when I announced that we weren't doing them anymore. He said, he goes, even though it screwed my Twitter up for 3 days after it every year, he goes, I'll kind of miss it. And he actually did helped out with one of the videos once.
I remember that
promotion. Yeah. I started those right before I left for Louisiana Downs. In fact, I had taken the job at Louisiana Downs. It was a complete, not throwaway, but it wasn't something I put a lot of energy into the idea. I just thought it would be funny to do kind of an off-key award show that was, in racing, but best fight and best all that kind of stuff.
Best hair.
Yeah. And God, I'm trying to, who won that the first year? Oh man, I'm trying, because there was some
Marty.
Marty. 100% it was Marty. You're right. Yeah, I mean Marty's hair is beautiful. But anyways, I thought about it, and so I took the job at LAD, and they announced my hiring like a week before the first Beemies. And I almost didn't do them because I didn't want them to think like that they hired a screwball, which they did, of course. But I went ahead and I YOLO'd it and did it. And it went really, really well. And then the second year it really took off. We trended nationally. And I remember the second year, Rudy Giuliani had dropped out of the presidential election, the 2016 cycle, but it was the end of 2015 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember on trending topics nationally, it was Rudy, because by then it was the end of the day, and it was Rudy Giuliani like 7 and Beemie Awards 8. And I remember thinking that was pretty awesome. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of just a dumb little thing that became a thing. But I don't know. This year I got to the point where I couldn't, especially with the pandemic. It wasn't going to be able to, it was going to be kind of just the same thing again, which it kind of had fallen into a little bit, but that's kind of its charm. And so I was a little conflicted on that sense, but I just thought if we were going to do it, it needed to kind of take a step forward. And it was, which just better video quality and maybe some more interactive kind of stuff. I had a lot of people over the years ask about doing it on TV, and I was like, it would never work on TV. Like, the fun of it is everybody interacting on Twitter. Like, that's the whole thing. But I just didn't think it would. I don't know. I thought it had reached its apex, and it was just time to move on from.
Once you get Mattress Mac involved, that's
no joke.
How do you seriously?
That's it. That's honestly, that was the example that I used, because some friends helped me with the writing and stuff, and I told them, I said, look, we're not going to beat Mattress Mac. Like, that was pretty good. And so I said, I don't know. And I just didn't have, between work and all the jobs I do right now, I just wasn't feeling it. And so I try to trust my gut when it comes to creative kind of stuff. And I mean, the hard part too is, we had gotten sponsors and stuff. So, I mean, it was not an insignificant amount of money that we were getting every year to do them. And so, and it all, and I got to pay, Carly and Mark and Danny that helped me with it. And I liked being able to do that for them every year, but I don't know. I just thought it had run its course and time to pull the plug.
Just to be clear, those 3 are the 3 unidentified friends.
That was funny. Yeah, the Blood Horse did an article about the Beemie, and they said Beem and some unidentified friends. And so in their profiles that week, they all put hashtag unidentified friend.
At least one of them still has it, and it's your unidentified friend that is my unidentified friend. So it's always good to bust his chops about that.
Yeah, no, but yeah, it had just the Beemies had run their course, and I think they were fun, and people hopefully will have good memories of them. And I the nice thing is I don't get tagged in every like dumb fight that goes on. I will not miss that part of it. Like every year,
I jobbed in 2017, man. I went nuts at Saratoga, and I lost to bet with frickin' Kevin,
who posted like literally tens of thousands of dollars of winners over the course of like a couple of months, like.
28.
Bet with Kevin's a legend.
Yeah, if you want to follow Champagne on Stable Duel, 128 Wins is the very creative name of his stable.
And if you want to follow me on Off and Pacing, 128 Racing is my stable name. And if you are a friend of mine on Pokemon Go, my username is 128 Winners, and I am closing in on level 38. It's going to be a really big day for me at some point between now and the end of the year. When
JD, let's move on.
And evolve a whole bunch of stuff. It gets me off my butt. Sue me.
And this is why Jason Beem has a great podcast where he has no guest or no co-host. I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Champagne.
I literally talked yesterday on our show about how it's sometimes difficult to do a one-person show because it is nice to have a back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's 100%.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the things that I wanted to ask you about in this content creation discussion. JD and I did not talk about this. This was completely organic. This is one of the reasons that in all seriousness we work well together, is how difficult is it sometimes to come up with so much content for all of the different content streams that you do? If it's just you doing all of this stuff, are there ever days where it's a Wednesday in the middle of March and you have no idea what's going on, no idea what to do? Is there ever any apprehension about that?
I mean, doing a 5-day a week show, there's certainly days that aren't, you're not as fired up to do it. But I mean, the interviews during the week, I think really help with that, because I have not ever had a guest where I'm like, oh, I got to talk to someone. Like, it's always fun to talk to somebody new, and or even if it's somebody old, like like Gabe Pruitt, I'll have him on once a year, and it's like, to me, those are like some of the most fun because I know I don't have to prepare a ton, first of all, but also like it's just going to be me and him kicking back and talking about harness or him being a degenerate at the dog track or one of 1,000 different things. And so the guests really helped kind of keep that fresh. And honestly, I have really good email interaction with our listeners, and they supply an endless stream of betting topics or handicapping topics or just racing topics with their emails. And so that really helps a lot too. And honestly, I just really love the broadcasting side of things. I'll get messages all the time from people who are like, oh, I'm thinking of starting a podcast. What should I do? And my first answer is do it because you like broadcasting, because I said at first, nobody's going to listen. Like there's going to be nobody listening, and you're going to need to be able to A, deal with that, and B, do it because you like it, not because you're trying to build some audience. If that comes and you're doing good work, great. But at first, you really do just need to like doing it. And for me, I like broadcasting. Like I find it therapeutic in a lot of ways, especially during the pandemic. Like I have somebody and something to talk to each day, which is very nice. No, I mean, there's times where, and even with the Beemies this year, like I was feeling that a little bit this summer, where I just was feeling kind of in a rut, as far as creative stuff. And so the idea to postpone that kind of was born out of that, and that's why I didn't make it. I mean, I took a couple months to make that decision, but it was certainly born out of just being like, God, what are we going to do? I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. So no, I mean, that happens, but that happens to everybody. And I mean, my thing with anything creative is to try to do. I mean, the best advice I ever got about writing when I was writing my book was I was like, I'm having trouble with the chapter. They go, well, just go write. Like, just go do something. And it might be crap and you might have to throw it away, but at least you did something. You got the momentum of doing something. And so I take that approach with content. I mean, I've done a lot of things over the years that never saw the light of day. And, you have to have a filter that, what's good and what's not. And luckily, and hopefully your employer trusts you with that stuff, because, a lot of times they're not, creative type folks. So they're, and I'm not saying that about anybody I work for, but I've had that before, where it's like, they're not content creative type people. And so they don't necessarily have the, not filter, but the guide for that kind of stuff.
JD, that sounds really familiar, doesn't it? Kind of sounds like why we started the show.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly why we started the show. And we were missing content and trying to figure out what in the racing world we could talk about. And I introduced Andrew to Australian racing, and then he picked it up pretty quick and enjoyed it and saw some of the things that I loved about it. And speaking of Australia today, Jason, and content creation, you had a great, video that came out today that was, I think everybody loved it, talking about the styles of bettors as they're watching a race and what they react. But I think you've learned a lesson about sometimes the funny side of the English language and the multiple ways that, the United Kingdom has their words and Australia has their words with the hashtag that you came up with for that video. But the feedback you got on that had to make you laugh all day.
So, yeah, I didn't know that. In fact, right when I posted it, people were commenting on it and retweeting it, which was great. And then at some point in the middle of the day, or actually early on, it was Ron Flattery said, boy, if this was in Australia, it'd have a whole different meaning. And I was like, okay. And I kind of just didn't even think, I thought, Ron's got a quirky sense of humor. So I didn't know. I thought maybe it was just a weird joke. And then later on, one of the official, like the Tab Australia, or one of the big Australian accounts retweeted it. And then I started getting all these replies about, that how to root is rooting can be a little bit of a different meaning over there. And so I got a little bit of a history lesson. And by the way, the other thing I learned was that leaners and cussers were the 1 and 1A of how people root their horses home, at least here in the States. Australia, it's obviously different, but yeah, a lot of leaners out there. I didn't realize it was that prevalent.
I've never been a leaner. I am a, where's the wire? Where's the wire? Where's the wire? I'm a combination between that, and I have been known to do the stop the race bit. I did this because I've been trying to practice my bait shock, which is just the poise that guy had.
With a million on the line. A million on the line.
And a photo, too. It wasn't a horse. it was not a no-doubter. This was a photo for $1 million.
Yeah. I wish I was not a cusser, but I am a cusser. I need to work on that.
And Andrew knows very well what I am, because he will get messages from me in the middle of races. I'm an it's already done. Already done.
Oh, you're done. Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is with that, a lot of times it's true, right? I mean, if you got a speed horse and you back bad, I mean, the worst part of that though, and I'm sure you guys are guilty of this too, your speed horse breaks bad, it rushes up, it's not going to win, but there's a party that's like, he doesn't look that bad.
For a split second on the start of the turn, it's always like, well, maybe.
He might be the most talented horse in this field.
Yeah, there was a horse at Aqueduct a few weeks ago that completely blew the break. Was supposed to be up on the lead in a 1.125 race. Jose rolls him out like 5 wide. He circles everybody. He's the 8 horse in the Eclipse Thoroughbred colors, but I can't remember his name. But he put him up into like 3rd, and then for a while down the backstretch, he kind of looked like he was cruising. And I'm thinking, I'm not getting my hopes up here, but he looks pretty good. And then then reality sets in.
Yeah. The weirdest thing though is when you do it's over, he has no chance. And it turns out the speed horse is actually a closer. The no, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, good ride.
Yeah.
Good ride, sir.
Hell of a ride.
But I never feel good about that as a bettor, because that means I had the race completely wrong from a handicap perspective, and I just got lucky.
Yeah.
Well, it beats having the race right from a handicapping perspective and getting beat, though.
I suppose that's true.
Better to win ugly than lose with a great score, said every golfer at all, ever. Now, one of the things that I actually went to go get before we started, let me cover up the address here. This is a box, and on the front of the box, it says Operation Gift Horse.
Yeah.
Jason, this is something that you and Teresa started either last year or the year before. It's a phenomenal thing. I was a part of it for the first time last year, and I got this guy named Beemie, and he sent me these glasses from this little track called Long Acres, maybe. I don't know.
The third one in the set is right back there. It was a 3-glass set, and Andrew got 2 of them. I couldn't not keep one.
I'm incredibly grateful for that. But on a serious note, especially this year, with everything that is going on in the world right now, we need stuff where people can spread joy in some way, shape, or form. This does it. I sent mine out last week. Fingers, toes, and eyes crossed that the U.S. Postal Service did its job and got it where it needs to go. I got mine in case whoever had me is watching. So if you're out there, I haven't opened it yet. Opening day is December the 18th, which is the Friday. We're recording this on Wednesday the 16th. I'm not cheating. I want everybody out there to know that. I have some integrity. But Jason, how did this come about? What was the logic behind it? And how do you feel about the response that it's gotten from so many members of the Twitter community?
I just thought it would be a fun idea to do a Twitter gift exchange. And I had thought about it a couple years ago. And then Teresa tweeted something that was in the vicinity of that. And so I messaged her and I was like, what about, oh no, you know what it was? We talked about it after Christmas of like 2017 into 18. And I remember saying like, wouldn't it be fun to do this? And she's like, yeah, and let's try to do it. And so the next year we organized it, and there's really not a ton of work that goes on our part, which is kind of nice. So it doesn't feel like it's something we run as opposed to something we just kind of help facilitate. And it makes for a really fun day. Obviously this year with the postal delays, it might be more of an opening week, but it just makes for a fun day. And what I think is cool is we've had people who have, didn't know who the other person they got matched with was. Now they follow that person and maybe they interact more. I think it's just a good way for racing Twitter to come together. In the little announcement newsletter, we always say, if you're, maybe it's a good time to, if you get matched with somebody you don't like, you can tell us, but maybe it's a good time to mend a fence. And I don't know. I just think it's kind of proven to be a fun little thing. And it's grown a little bit each year. I think this year there's like 50 something people
Not bad.
that are in it. Yeah. I mean, so it's a small little deal, but it makes for a fun couple of days. And, like you said, it's with 2020 being what it is, it's just fun to have some things to look forward to.
Yeah, and a fun story that ties into this show, actually, Jason, is last year Jennifer Kelly got my name, and then we started interacting on Twitter. We had her on as a guest on this podcast to talk about her books and obviously her great work on Sir Barton, and now what she's working on with Omaha and Gallant Fox, and then became friends with Andrew, and now we're Facebook friends and Twitter friends and interact with, and that's the cool thing is while you can say what you will about horse racing Twitter. I mean, we are all passionate people about horse racing, and we all have pretty similar interests. For some reason, a lot of us are interested in professional wrestling as well. That one, I will never figure out why that's happened, but it just
by a lot, you
happens.
mean like 7 people.
But we're very vocal.
Yeah, and it's 8, by the way. Rachel McLaughlin is a member.
Oh, I thought she said something the other day that I thought was going to send Zocali to the moon. I thought he was going to completely flip.
Was it the Bret Hart thing?
Yes.
Oh, great.
And he responded so respectfully, and like with I really respected Darren after that, because I said she just dropped the biggest troll on him of all time. There's no way he's not going to explode, and he did.
And I think I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. When she sent that, I immediately texted her like, "Boy, did you start something!" And then nothing ever came of it. So
yeah. Shout out to Darren. He showed great restraint.
Gino Bacola was on that thread too, and he showed some restraint as well. He's a fellow Brett guy. So
Gino Nicola.
Yeah.
One of my favorite full names to say.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of my favorite people too. A guy that's been on the show a couple of different times. Thankfully, he's going back to shaving after the whole playoff beard fiasco. I think he had a squirrel in there at some point.
I didn't know that was going on, and then I saw it like after the fact. Whoa! I mean, Gino's a handsome young man, but that was a different level.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, I got to respect the dedication to the bit, because that was a playoff beard, and he decided to roll over one LA playoff beard into the other LA playoff season. I mean, that's dedication right there. I give him credit for that.
Everybody loves Gino.
Yeah, I mean, when I don't shave like today, it's just simply because I don't want to, and I have no need to, because I haven't worked in an office since March.
I've tried like 5 times over the years, like, oh, maybe I'll try growing a beard. And the minute it gets to the itchy stage, I'm out. I just can't. I can't do it.
I'm a wimp.
I've never gotten beyond itchy neck, and then I'm out.
I hear you. So, Jason, every week we do a segment called Final Thoughts, and fittingly, it's just a matter of turning the floor over to our guests, and in some cases us. Jason, I'm going to request that whenever you're done with whatever your final thought is, wherever it is, can be racing, can be holiday related, can be COVID, can be anything you want to talk about, this is your time to do it. But when you're done, send it over to JD, because I'm probably going to need a moment to compose properly the things that I need to say. I wish I could, be more positive than that, but this one's going to be kind of tough. So, Jason, the floor is yours.
Well, I'll start with. I'll just think what's on my mind. It's not a happy one, so maybe we'll have a sad ending here. But one of my best friends from growing up, his dad passed this week, and we had the virtual funeral about an hour before I came on here.
I'm sorry.
And so I've been thinking a lot about him, and what I was thinking about most was, like, they always say it takes a village, right? And I realized, like, because I played baseball through school, and all my best friends were my baseball teammates, and I realized, like, how much time I spent with their dads, because we'd always go over to each other's house, and my dad was one of our coaches, and so they were all very close to my dad's stuff. And so I was really reflecting a lot today on just that, on how many, how much my friends' dads, did a lot of dad stuff with me, especially after my dad passed away. And so I don't know, I was feeling just very appreciative of having some really, really wonderful men in my life. So that's what I was thinking about.
Thanks for that, Jason. And I will try to bring some levity between this. I had a Gino related plug that, even though they're not a sponsor of this show, if you want to get your Sarah candles from sarahcandles.com, that's CERA candles.com.
Promo code Gino.
10% off your purchase for the holidays, in time for the holidays. We love Gino, and he's legend. We love those candles. So, Andrew, I'm sorry for maybe too much levity, but take it away.
It's okay. No, and what Jason said was beautiful, and I'm actually gonna piggyback off of that a little bit. For those of you who follow me on social media out there, it's been a really tough week. I was supposed to be preparing to fly home for the holidays. My plane was supposed to leave tomorrow. Mind you, the plane probably wasn't leaving anyway, because there's currently a big, huge blizzard going through the Northeast that was going to dump 1.5 feet of snow on JFK International Airport. Having said that, I'm not making the trip for other reasons. Of course, it's not an environment that I can expose myself to when I am traveling to see parents that are both in their mid-60s. Heaven forbid I wind up being on a plane with somebody who starts coughing up a lung in midair, and I'm staying home. And it's one of those things that when I moved 7 years ago from New York to California, and then from Southern California to Northern California, The one promise that I made was that I would always fly home for Christmas, and it's tough. It's tough, and I know I'm not the only person in that situation. And it's one of those things where, my goodness, of all the things that the pandemic has done, this is the one time I don't care about making the right call because it still stinks. It's just, it's hard, and it's hard for a lot of people. I wrote something. It's on my Facebook. It's on my Twitter page as well. It's stickied there. It's a very long thing about how if you're in this position out there and you feel like you're alone, talk to somebody. And if you're in a position where you can see your family in a safe environment, hug the skittles out of them. Because the people that can't, there's no amount of money that I wouldn't pay to be able to somehow safely travel cross country and see my family. Empty my bank account, I don't care. This is going to be a tough time of year for a lot of people. And there are a lot of things that are going on that are keeping me sane through all of this. This podcast being one of them. JD, we kid a lot. We go back and forth. We started this back in March for a completely different reason. I had mulled over potentially getting back into the podcast game to do stuff. Then COVID hit, and the show took on a completely different thing. To Jason, to all the guests that we have had this year, thank you. We love you. We appreciate you. The other show that I do with Gino and with Darren, the weekly wrestling rewatch, thank you. If you've listened to any of my stuff, if you've read any of my stuff, if you're out there and you need to talk, if you're in a similar situation, my Twitter DMs are open. I'm an easy guy to find. I'm usually on the grid. Don't feel like you're the only person going through this. A lot of people are going through this. And it stinks, and there's no other way around it. It stinks, but you hope by doing the right things that things will get better. And there's vaccines coming out to the tune of Stone Cold Steve Austin's theme music. You can find that on Twitter somewhere. It's a fantastic video. It's great. And hopefully things get better soon.
Here, Andrew, and thanks, Jason. Really appreciate you joining us today. You can follow Jason on Twitter at Beemie Awards, or is it now Beemie Award S because you're a super fan of the horse Beemie Award, and that's why it's Beemie Award S.
No, the horse is a fan of mine.
Okay,
He should be.
Should be.
He hasn't been on the work tab in a while. I think he's maybe waiting for Oaklawn.
Yeah, I think he got one run in at Hawthorne after running at Fairmont, and I think he is done for 2021. So thanks, Jason. And Andrew, I gave you enough time to recover here. Why don't you send us home with the catchphrase, and we'll see everybody later.
I will do that. But before we go, just a quick thing. Next week, we will be putting together a montage of some of our greatest hits from the start of our show since March all the way up to now. I'm actually going to be the one putting that together. This was going to be a surprise birthday present for JD until the guy decided he was going to do it. And I said, well, birthday's in May. Gives a crap. Anyway, it's going to be airing next week. We hope you enjoy it. If you've seen any of our shows this year with some of the big guests that we have had come on, you're going to love this. If you like what we do, hit that subscribe button, drop us a like, leave us a comment. We see everything that comes through here. For our special guest this week, Jason Beem, for JD Fox, I'm Andrew Champagne. Hang in there, everybody. It's a tough time. We're going to band together. We're going to get through this. Stay off the beaches, y'all.
Take care.